In the heart of Pine Ridge, Montana, Henderson's Hardware isn't just a place. For nuts and bolts for the past 4 years it's been home to Major A. Magnificent 45 pounds bobcat with tufted ears, amber eyes, and a past shadowed by a close call with a trap that left him unable to return to the wild, rescued as a young bobcat cub and unable to be released due to early injuries and human imprinting. Major was raised under careful supervision and eventually became a familiar presence in the shop. To his owner, Major was more than a rescued animal, he was a companion, a symbol of trust, and a bridge between the wild and human world. Customers were intrigued and delighted by the sight of a bobcat sitting attentively near the register. This is the story of Major the bobcat, who greets customers at the counter, and the extraordinary gift he discovered that bridges the gap between wild and human, turning everyday encounters into moments of pure magic. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun crept through the plate glass windows of Henderson's Hardware store, casting long shadows across the well-worn wooden floors. Margaret Henderson had been opening the shop this way for nearly 15 years, but today felt different. Today marked the 4th anniversary of the day that changed everything, the day Major came into their lives. She remembered it vividly, a rainy April morning when her husband Tom had burst through the store's back entrance, his flannel shirt soaked, cradling a bundle of wet blankets. "Maggie, you're going to want to see this," he'd said, his voice trembling with excitement and concern. When he'd peeled back the blankets, 2 amber eyes had stared up at them, wild, frightened, but somehow trusting. Major had been just 3 months old then, barely larger than a house cat, with tufted ears and oversized paws that hinted at the magnificent creature he would become. The vet had given them little hope that first week. Major had been found beside a logging road in northern Montana, his mother nowhere to be seen, his left front paw mangled from what looked like a trap. The injury had healed, but with a permanent limp that would prevent his return to the wild. Dr. Sarah Patterson had been frank, he's imprinted on humans now. Releasing him would be a death sentence, and so Major had stayed. Now at 4 years old, he was a testament to the remarkable bond between human and wild animal. Margaret smiled as she unlocked the register, knowing that within minutes the soft patting of paws would announce Major's arrival from the apartment upstairs where he spent his nights. Tom emerged from the storage room, his silver hair now more salt than pepper, carrying a box of screws. At 62, he moved with the careful deliberation of a man who'd spent decades working with his hands. "He's already stirring," Tom said with a grin, heard him yawning upstairs as if summoned by their conversation. Major appeared at the top of the stairs that led to their small apartment above the store. At 45 pounds he was magnificent. Tawny fur marked with darker stripes, a snow-white bib that made him look perpetually formal, and those extraordinary eyes that seemed to see straight into a person's soul. "Morning, handsome," Margaret called, and Major's ears flicked forward in acknowledgement. He descended the stairs with careful grace, his slight limp barely noticeable after all these years. By the time he reached the bottom, his demeanor had transformed from sleepy contentment to alert attention. This was his workday beginning. Major took his customary position on a customuled platform behind the counter, Tom's handiwork cushioned with a thick fleece that Major had claimed as his own. From this vantage point he could observe everything: customers browsing the aisles, children pressing their noses against the window, the comings and goings of the small mountain town of Pine Ridge, Montana. The first customer arrived at 7:05 sharp. Mrs. Eleanor Fitzgerald, a spry octogenarian who lived 6 blocks away. She was Major's first friend and fiercest advocate. "Good morning, dear ones," she called her voice carrying the authority of her 83 years. Major's tail, which had been swishing lazily, stilled completely, his eyes fixed on Mrs. Fitzgerald with an intensity that newcomers sometimes found alarming, but Mrs. Fitzgerald knew the drill. She approached the counter slowly, one hand extended. "Hello, Major," she said softly. "I've got something for you." Major's nose twitched from her purse. Mrs. Fitzgerald produced a small paper bag. Inside were 3 pieces of freeze-dried chicken, Major's favorite treat. This was their daily ritual, repeated every morning for the past 2 years, but today something was different. As Mrs. Fitzgerald handed over the treats, Major didn't immediately take them. Instead, he stood up on his platform, stretched with deliberate slowness, and then did something that made Margaret's breath catch. He reached out with his right paw and placed it gently on Mrs. Fitzgerald's hand. It was such a human gesture, so unexpected that the elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. "Well, I'll be," she whispered. "You're welcome, Major. You're very welcome." Word of Major's handshake spread through Pine Ridge faster than news of a new construction project. By afternoon, a steady stream of customers had found reasons to visit Henderson's Hardware. Some came for legitimate purchases, nails, light bulbs, garden tools. Others came with the transparent excuse of needing a washer for a faucet that worked perfectly. Margaret watched it all with growing wonder. Major seemed to understand the attention he was receiving with each visitor who offered him a treat. He repeated the gesture, that gentle placement of his paw on their hand. Not everyone, though. Major was selective. Children under 12 received gentle sniffs, but no paw. Strangers who approached too quickly or spoke too loudly got his polite attention, but nothing more. But for those he deemed worthy, the regulars, the patient ones, those who spoke to him rather than about him, he offered this new gift. Dr. Patterson stopped by around 3 o'clock, ostensibly to pick up a new lock for her clinic, but really to investigate the report she'd been hearing. "Maggie, what's this I hear about?" Major shaking hands, she asked, setting down her purchase. Major, who had been dozing on his platform, opened one eye at the sound of the vet's voice. Dr. Patterson had been a constant in his life, and Major associated her with both unpleasant procedures and the trust of his human family. "Watch this," Margaret said, pulling a treat from the jar they kept beneath the register. She handed it to Dr. Patterson. "Offer it to him, but don't rush." Dr. Patterson approached slowly, extending the treat. Major rose, sniffed delicately, and then there it was. His paw reached out and rested on the vet's fingers. "I'll be damned," Dr. Patterson murmured. That's remarkable. In all my years treating wildlife, I've never seen anything quite like this. He's not just responding to conditioning. This is choice. This is communication." "What does it mean?" Tom asked, coming over from where he'd been pretending to organize brackets. Dr. Patterson gently stroked Major's paw before he withdrew it. "I think," she said slowly, "that Major has found his own way to say thank you. Animals express gratitude in many ways, but this is extraordinary. He's using what might be the most fundamentally human gesture to bridge the gap between his world and ours." The news crews arrived on Thursday. Margaret had been dreading this moment ever since the Pineridge Gazette picked up the story. She loved Major, loved sharing his presence with their community, but the thought of cameras and reporters invading their quiet world made her stomach twist with anxiety. "We could close for the day," Tom suggested, watching through the window as a van with Channel 7's logo emblazoned on its side pulled into their parking lot. Major seemed to sense the tension. His ears were forward, alert, his body language questioning. He'd learned to read his human's moods with uncanny accuracy. No, Margaret decided. Major's never hidden from anything. We won't start now. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah Rachel, approached with encouraging restraint. Margaret had spoken with her producer by phone, establishing ground rules: no sudden movements, no flash photography, no touching Major without permission. This is incredible, Sarah said softly, watching Major from a respectful distance. May I offer him something? Margaret nodded, handing over a treat. Let him see your intentions. Move slowly. What happened next would be replayed on newscasts across the country. Sarah approached the counter. Treat extended. Major rose, assessed, and then, with unmistakable deliberation, reached out his paw. But this time he didn't just touch her hand, he held it there, his eyes never leaving her face, as if he were taking her measure as surely as she was taking his. The moment stretched into something profound. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and her voice, when she finally spoke on camera, carried genuine emotion. This isn't just a bobcat who shakes hands, she said. This is a bridge between worlds, a reminder that empathy and communication can exist between species in ways we're only beginning to understand. The segment aired that Sunday night, and by Monday morning Henderson's hardware store had become a destination. Cars with license plates from Wyoming, Idaho, and North Dakota filled the parking lot. Families drove hours for the chance to meet Major. The local Motel 6 reported being fully booked for the first time in 20 years. But success brought challenges Margaret hadn't anticipated. We can't let everyone just come up and offer him treats, Tom said, watching a group of teenagers who seemed more interested in getting a viral video than actually connecting with Major. Look at him, he's overwhelmed. Major had retreated to the back corner of his platform, his body language clearly indicating distress. His ears were flattened, his pupils dilated. Margaret felt her heart break a little. We need to do something. This isn't what we wanted. Dr. Patterson, who had been consulting on managing the sudden influx of visitors, suggested a solution: scheduled interaction times twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Major would be available for his handshakes the rest of the time. A clear barrier would protect him from well-meaning but overwhelming attention. They implemented the system within a week. Morning sessions ran from 10 to 11 a.m., afternoon sessions from 3 to 4 p.m. Visitors could sign up for 5-minute appointments. The response was remarkable. People were willing to wait to follow the rules for their chance to connect with Major. But the real test came with little Emma Rodriguez. Emma was 7 years old, born with severe autism and largely nonverbal. Her grandmother Rosa had driven from Denver after seeing the news story. Emma loves animals, Rosa explained to Margaret, but she's never been able to connect with them. She gets too excited, moves too fast, they run away. It was a Tuesday afternoon during one of Major's quiet times. The store was empty except for a few regular customers browsing peacefully. Margaret looked at the little girl who stood perfectly still beside the counter, her dark eyes fixed on Major with an intensity that seemed to rival his own. We're not supposed to let anyone approach him outside of scheduled times, Tom began, but Margaret placed a hand on his arm. Major, she said softly, what do you think? The bobcat, who had been resting with his eyes half closed, suddenly became alert. He rose, stretched, and then did something unprecedented. He jumped down from his platform and walked to the edge of the counter closest to Emma. Emma didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Major extended his paw over the counter edge just inches from Emma's hands. It's okay, Mika, Rosa whispered. "He wants to meet you." Emma slowly lifted her hand the moment her fingertips touched Major's paw. Something shifted in her small body, her rigid posture relaxed, her face, usually a mask of careful neutrality, lit up with the first smile her grandmother had seen in months. For nearly 5 minutes girl and Bobcat maintained their connection. Major seemed to understand that this child needed more time, more patience. When Emma finally lowered her hand, she looked directly into Major's eyes, something she rarely did with even her closest family members. Then she spoke. Her voice was rusty from disuse, but clear. "Thank you, Major." Rosa burst into tears. Margaret found herself reaching for Tom's hand. Even Major seemed affected, his usual dignified composure replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. From that day forward, Emma and her grandmother became regular visitors. Emma was the only child Major consistently offered his paw to, the only one who seemed to understand his need for calm, measured interaction. The seasons changed and Major's daily routines became as much a part of Pine Ridge's rhythm as the sunrise over the Mission Mountains. Tourists still came, drawn by the story of the Bobcat who shook hands, but they found something larger than a quirky roadside attraction. They found a community that had embraced the extraordinary, a place where the boundaries between wild and domestic, animal and human, had blurred into something beautiful. Margaret often marveled at how Major had changed their lives. The hardware store was more successful than ever, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was watching Mrs. Fitzgerald's face light up each morning when Major offered his paw. What mattered was seeing Emma's continued progress, her growing confidence with each visit. What mattered was the way Major had taught an entire town, an entire watching world, that connection transcends species, that kindness can take forms we never expect. On a crisp October evening, as the aspens turned gold around Pine Ridge, Dr. Patterson stopped by for one of her regular checkups. Major's health remained good, but at 4 years old he was entering the twilight of his expected lifespan. For a bobcat in captivity, he's remarkable, she said, watching Major carefully examined a feathered toy Tom had made him when you first brought him to me, injured and orphaned. I never imagined this, what he's become, what he's given people. Margaret nodded, tears threatening as they always did when the conversation turned to Major's mortality. We know we're borrowing time with him. Every day is precious. He knows he's loved, Dr. Patterson assured her. That's not always something we can say about captive wildlife, but Major knows. As if hearing his name, Major looked up from his toy. His golden eyes swept the room, taking in his humans, the ones who had saved him, raised him, loved him. Then, in a gesture that needed no interpretation, he rose and walked to Margaret, placing his front paws on her knees in a request to be closer. Margaret scooped him up, marveling as always at his trust, his warmth. Major settled against her chest, purring, a sound he reserved for these quiet moments with his chosen family outside Pine Ridge. Prepared for evening, the last tourists of the day had departed with their photos and stories. Mrs. Fitzgerald had made her evening visit, bringing Major's favorite treats and receiving his grateful paw in return. Emma and Rosa had stopped by before dinner, and Emma had managed 3 full sentences while holding Major's paw, a record that had left everyone beaming. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new connections. Some would come seeking a viral moment for social media. Others would arrive carrying heavy hearts, hoping for the kind of healing that seemed to radiate from this unlikely ambassador of joy. Major would greet them all with patience, offering his gift to those who approached with open hearts and genuine intention. But tonight he was simply Major rescued beloved and home his paw. Reached out one more time, not for a treat or a photo opportunity, but simply to touch the hand of the woman who had become his anchor in a world he was never meant to inhabit. Margaret closed her eyes, feeling the gentle weight of his paw, knowing that whatever time they had left together was a masterpiece of the heart, a story of survival, adaptation, and the mysterious ways love finds to bridge even the widest gaps between souls. In the morning the routine would begin again. Customers would arrive. Major would take his position behind the counter, and one by one he would offer his extraordinary gift, a Bobcat's handshake, a wild heart-choosing connection, a bridge between worlds built one gentle touch at a time. The story of Major would be told for years to come, but for those who lived it day by day, it was never really about the spectacle. It was about the quiet miracle of understanding, the daily choice to see beyond species and circumstance, to the shared language of kindness. Major had found his purpose in a world far from the mountains where he was born, and in doing so he had taught everyone who met him that sometimes the most profound connections come not from similarities, but from the courage to reach across differences with an open paw or hand and say, in whatever language the heart speaks, "Thank you, you matter. You are seen." As the last light faded from the Montana sky, Major dozed peacefully in Margaret's arms, his work done for the day. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to touch lives, to bridge worlds, to prove that wonder still existed in a world that often forgot to look for it. The Bobcat greets customers at the counter they came to discover, and what he does for a tip, he reminds them that magic is real, that connection transcends all boundaries, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected sources, wrapped not in paper and bows, but in fur and whiskers and the gentle pressure of a wild paw. Choosing to trust in Henderson's hardware store every day was a reminder that grace could walk on four legs, that wisdom could peer out through amber eyes, and that the simple act of reaching out, whether with paw or hand, could change the world one connection at a time. Major's story was far from over, but each chapter was already a masterpiece, written in the shared language of love between species, one handshake at a time.